Hello everybody, this is part 2 of our Moho bite-sized tutorials. Hopefully in part 1 we were able to get a good jumping off point. Now alongside with that I do encourage everybody to jump in, try some things and make some mistakes, and it'll really help you learn along the way as well. But for this part 2, I wanted to talk about two things. One being angle constraints, and two being adding a little bit more detail and a little bit more curvature to your character. What I mean by the first thing, the angle constraints, is we can see here that we have a character that can move relatively okay, but it moves in ways that don't make sense here. Don't make sense to real physics, anyways. So, what we need to do is go ahead and set angle constraints up. Before I move forward into that, I did want to mention that for every model that you're creating, remember that you're creating that model for the scene. Not that you're trying to make a fully fleshed character that just lives in the world and you can do everything with. You can get close to something similar to that, but it's advisable to go ahead and think about what scene you're trying to work on. Because sometimes you'll end up spending a lot of time putting these parameters in place where they don't need to be. And it'll be a waste of time. If, let's say, you went around and did the angle constraints and the curvature of every single part of this, but really for the purposes of the scene, you needed just his right side head movement to be bobbing along to some music. It would not be beneficial to set up the legs, for example. Okay, so for the angle constraints, again, we have this wonkiness going on here. What you're going to want to do is go to the bone layer here. Mine is Mr. Dot. Go to select bone, and remember that is B on the keyboard. Now we'll go ahead and start with this one because it's the most obvious. We will go up here under B, under select bone, go to bone constraints and angle constraints. Now immediately you should see these two lines pop up, and that's as far as the program will let that bone move around. So just leaving it right there. Now we can only move that far. Now with something like this, I tend to want a little less movement than that. But it is up to you. I'm going to go ahead and go 50-50, negative 50-50. Push enter, and you can see that pop right into place. Same with this one. Let's go for another 50-50 here. Perfect. And now what we have is something that hopefully looks a little bit more reasonable. That's fine. And let's say he was trying to touch his toes, so he's arching his back. There we go. So we got something that's actually going on. Now, I know this character in particular isn't anatomically correct or anything, but your character doesn't have to be. You know, it can be any character you're trying to make. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fast forward here. And I'll go ahead and go over what I did. But really what you want to do is angle constraint anything that you need to. For the purposes of the tutorial, I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that everything's taken care of here. Okay, now we have Mr. Dot all set up with some basic angle constraints around his body. Now I purposely left a little bit of an issue in here in case some of you guys run into it. Now, for example, if I were to move this way, I look at him as if he has his legs in front of him. But the leg is not only, let's say this leg, is not only behind the body, it's also behind this leg. Two things need to happen for us to go ahead and fix that. A, here in the section with the layers, we're going to go ahead and bring the limbs up. That'll put it right ahead of the body, and that way we don't have to deal with that too much. This is one of the constraints of Moho in general. We do have to play around with where the layers are in the hierarchy. But there are ways to go ahead and take care of that in actions again. Now, again, with this part, this leg I imagine to be in front of this leg. And the way we're going to do that is just go ahead and change that over. Remember, just click, drag, and make sure that your layers are in order there. Now that we have that set up, I want to go ahead and work on just adding a little bit more detail to your character. Now, this character wasn't drawn out. You saw how it was drawn out in the first tutorial. Very, very basic. I'll show you a little bit on how you can get around this just from right from the beginning. But let's say you were to start with something that was basic like this. What you'd want to do, let's work on the torso first. If we can go ahead and move this around, you can kind of see it's just this shape changing because there's only 4 points to this vector. So we're losing some mass while that's happening. We're making things happen that should not look correct here. What we want to do is add some curvature. So what we'll go ahead and do is make sure the torso layer is selected, the vector layer that you're working on, and go to add point. Now again, add point is same as add bone under the bone structure. A would be to add bone, but under a vector, it would be A for add point. We're going to go ahead and add one right there, one right there, here, and here. Now, even with that really quick adjustment, we can already see some good curvature going on with the body rather than just a square moving around. So he actually looks like he's arching over to touch the floor. That can go the same with all parts of his body. Now, during this, I'm going to go ahead and not mess with his overall structure, but let's say the arm next. Let's go with the left arm. Again, with the vector, we're going to go ahead and add point. What I would suggest is going ahead and making sure that it is overlapping. And you can go ahead and add a few more points as well. That way it looks a little bit more structured. You can go to transform points here. That would be under T. Give it something that actually looks a little bit more human, if that's what you're going for, or, humanoid. And this can be done immediately if you have the eye for it. But always remember you can go ahead and fix these issues up later on as well. Let's go ahead and do the same for this. The reason we're going to want it to overlap is that way when this bends, there's not going to be too much of a showing of that crease over here. Not only that, is some of your characters might need outlines. I'll show you that on one of my characters, actually in this one, in just a few moments. But basically what you want to do is make sure that you're adding enough points. Don't go crazy with it, because a lot of times it's not necessary. Now for this, I'm going to go ahead and just drag this point out to here. Now there will be some need to structure this a little differently along the way, but for the time being, let's just go ahead and go with something very basic here. Even with adding these points, it's not going to magically just look right away. We do have some work to do in actions that I keep on bringing up, but I think I'm going to address that in the next tutorial. But let's go ahead and go to Mr. Dot, the bone layer here, and start moving this around a little bit. Now I know this arm's not going to look right. That's going to have to be done in the layers. But you can see some curvature actually happening with this character. If we did this, you can do the wave and such. A big improvement from this, for example. Let's say this compared to this. Now this area here, we can already see is kind of a troublesome area. We could go ahead and add this in right now, but really, again, it's going to come down to the actions that we implement later on. So I would suggest you play around with it a little bit, but don't worry too much at this point. What we want to do is just add enough that you know that there's curvature going. Now for those of you that haven't even started the character yet, you can go ahead and do this right from the beginning. For example, when I made the character, let's go ahead and do a fill black. This was the torso, right? Just 4 points, easy peasy. What you can do instead is go in there and actually make what you want the character to look like here. Now there's going to be some weird curvature. We can go ahead and get rid of that. But let's just say you wanted that to be the body, right? So we don't have to start off with a box. We can go ahead and fix it right from the get-go. Now, one other thing I did go ahead and mention is I just want to go ahead and get rid of that. I'm going to go ahead and add points around to Mr. Dot to make him look a little bit more believable. And that will show you into the next tutorial where we'll go after actions. Now, just for right now, I keep on mentioning actions all the time. What I want to go ahead and show you is just an example of what I mean. And I'll do that from this older file we brought up in the first tutorial. Now, it's a little hard to see with this guitar in the way, so let me go ahead and find that, and I will get rid of that for us. Oh, here it is. So ignore this for right now. I have that in the way. Well, I have that masked out. That way the guitar and the hand would make sense for this particular scene. But let's not pay attention to that. What I want to bring up is the legs here. So we're going to go up to... So we're going to go up to the bone layer. And let's take a look at the legs here. So notice that they would work differently, even they stretch and everything, depending on the movement here. Same goes for something like the hand. It's pretty deliberate the way it is moving. The reason is, let's go up to Windows and Actions. Now, if you look at all these actions here, what's really going on is it tells the program how you want those vectors to move when those bones are moving. It sometimes gets in the way of itself, but there's certain ways to go ahead and deal with that. Let's look at the... Oh, perfect. We're on the left hand. Let's go ahead and open the left hand. Okay, you can see here for the left hand, one is for moving upwards, one is for moving downwards. So what we do is we have the action here moving downwards. And this goes into part of the animation, right? I don't have this clipped out because I have a pick there originally, but let's actually go ahead and go to this one so it makes a little bit more sense here. There we go. Okay, so what you do is you would put the movement of the bone from, let's say, for this one, it is 0 to 24 frames. What you'd want to do is start with frame 0 with the hand, and then move to the 24th frame, and then go ahead and structure how you want that hand to look at the 24th frame as well. And you can see that here with these dots. Now, that might be a little bit beyond where we are right now, and that's why I didn't want to touch it quite yet. But to give you an idea, that is how we're going to be moving forward with getting our guys to move correctly. So now you can see with the arm, same thing. Let's go ahead and take a look at the arm actions. I don't know which one's which as far as up and down, but basically when that arm is going up, I've told the left arm here, not there. Here we go. I've told the left arm here at 48 when it comes to its peak that this is the way it should look. Rather than, just letting Moho fly by itself. You have to give it instructions. That is just a general idea of what actions are when I keep on mentioning them. We'll eventually get to them here with Mr. Dot. And that way this won't look so crudely done. It'll actually look like an arm flexing. Same with any other mishaps that are going on here. But if you're following along and you've gotten to this point, it looks like we're all set to go. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.